Chapter 1. Ghosts at Carousel 3. Jennifer Roush liked airports for the same reason she liked office work and alphabetized shelves. Everyone here moved with purpose. Even when they were lost in motion. That was comforting to someone who had built her adult life around forward momentum. She stood at Carousel 3, her heels kicked off and nudged together with the side of her foot, her carry-on snagged on her elbow while the larger suitcase refused to appear. The business trip had gone well. Productive meetings, polite handshakes, the faint satisfaction of competence. But it had still required small talk with strangers and room service eggs. She was tired in the dull, professional way that never quite justified complaining. She checked her watch. Her phone buzzed with a work email she ignored on principle. Saturday tomorrow, she reminded herself. Library day. Kids, questions, picture books bent backward by enthusiastic fingers. She smiled faintly at the thought. The carousel groaned to life again. She was half looking at the luggage, half already mentally reorganizing her weekend, when something tugged sharply at her awareness. Not a sound. Not movement. Familiarity. Jennifer lifted her gaze across the moving belt. A man stood opposite her. Dark jacket draped over one arm, phone in his other hand. He was angled away, eyes scanning each bag as it slid past. Older than the man she remembered, yes, but not unrecognizable. The same posture. The same unconscious stillness, like he only moved when movement mattered. Her breath caught so hard it hurt. Scott. For a moment she didn't move. Her brain offered rapid, unhelpful suggestions. You're tired. This is someone else. People age into familiarity all the time. Then he shifted his weight. It was him. The world narrowed violently, the way it does just before a misstep on stairs. Jennifer's pulse slammed against her ears. Suddenly, it was senior year again. Cheap beer and concrete hallways and a phone warm from someone else's hand. 10 feet. That was all that separated them. Her feet moved before permission arrived. She rounded the end of the carousel without thinking, dodging a rolling suitcase, her heart performing something between a sprint and a free fall. She didn't call his name. She didn't trust her voice to behave. Scott noticed her approach before she reached him. Something must have changed in the air. Recognition maybe travels faster than sound. He looked up. For one suspended second, neither of them spoke. His expression fractured in quick succession. Confusion, then clarity, then shock so complete it almost made her laugh. Sadness followed, sharp and familiar. And then, so fast she might have imagined it, something lighter flared across his face. Joy? Or relief? Jennifer, he said finally. Her name sounded older in his mouth. Tested. Real. Hi, she managed, proud that her voice only wobbled a little. They stood there, mirroring each other across the rubber belt. The baggage passed between them, impersonal and irrelevant. He stopped, swallowed. You look well. So do you. It was absurd how inadequate words were after 12 years. She wanted to say everything. She wanted to say nothing. I didn't expect to see you. He huffed a quiet, humorless laugh. I don't think either of us did. She noticed the gray at his temples, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of a life lived without her witnessing it. The thought stung more than she expected. I don't want to scare you, she said quickly. If this isn't a good time. No. He shook his head, almost reflexively. No, it's okay. I just didn't realize how loud airports were until now. That surprised a smile out of her despite everything. Felt like breathing after holding it too long. They lapsed into silence again. Awkward but not hostile. He glanced back at the carousel, then at her. Are you visiting? Work trip. Flew back this afternoon. She hesitated. I live here. He nodded. So do I. Have for a while. Of course he did. The universe had a sense of humor like that. Listen, she said, before courage could dissolve. I know this isn't something you schedule, but I've needed to apologize to you for a long time, properly. And I don't expect anything from it. I don't want to do it here, over luggage. Scott's jaw tightened. He studied her face, searching, perhaps, for the girl she'd been, or the woman she'd become. A battered duffel tumbled off the belt behind him. He grabbed it absently, still watching her. Not tonight, he said slowly. I'm exhausted and I don't trust myself not to say something I'll regret. Relief bloomed so hard it threatened to knock her over. That's fair, she said. Completely fair. He hesitated, then added. Coffee? Tomorrow. Public place. Daylight. She nodded immediately. Yes, absolutely. They exchanged numbers, both deliberately avoiding comment on the fact they already had once known each other's schedules by heart. When they parted, there was no hug, no dramatic moment, just an unfamiliar gentleness that followed her all the way home. Jennifer drove in silence, hands tight on the wheel, the city lights blurring past as if she were underwater. For the first time in years, the memory didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility knocking carefully, waiting to be invited in. Chapter 2. Coffee is not closure. Jennifer arrived 10 minutes early and still felt late. The cafe Scott had chosen sat on a quiet corner downtown, all brick and big windows, the kind of place that advertised itself as neutral ground without meaning to. Sunlight spilled across worn wood floors. It smelled like espresso and cinnamon and conversations that mattered only to the people having them. She ordered a black coffee she wouldn't finish and chose a table near the window. Visible, she decided, so neither of them felt cornered. Her phone buzzed once with a work notification she ignored with practiced discipline. Her hands, less disciplined, worried at the sleeve of her cardigan. She had rehearsed this apology for more than a decade. Entire scripts lived in her head, revised endlessly like documents she was afraid to submit. Today, each version felt suddenly useless. The door opened. A bell chimed. She looked up instantly. Scott stood just inside, scanning the room. He wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, less guarded than he'd been the night before. When he spotted her, his shoulders loosened a fraction before he clearly remembered himself and straightened. They smiled at the same time, both tentative. "Hey," he said, approaching. "Hey." She stood, then immediately felt silly and sat back down. "Sorry." "Hi." He smiled a little wider at that and set his coffee on the table. A latte, she noticed, exactly as he used to order. Some things resisted time. They sat. The table felt too small for the amount of history between them. "So," Scott said. "Daylight. Public place," Jennifer added. "Still exhausting," he finished, and she laughed, surprised again by how easily it came. Silence followed, not awkward exactly, but dense. Like a held breath. Jennifer inhaled deliberately. "Thank you for coming." He nodded. "Thank you for asking first." She appreciated that he'd noticed. She always had. "I'll just say it," she began, fingers curling around her mug. "I am so sorry. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what I did." Scott didn't interrupt. He watched her with an attentiveness that made her chest ache. "I thought I knew what I saw," she continued. "And instead of asking just one question, I decided I'd been betrayed. And then I chose to retaliate. Publicly. Cruelly." Her voice tightened but didn't break. "You didn't deserve that." "No," he said quietly. "Not harsh. Just honest." She nodded. "I know. And the worst part is, I told myself for years that the punishment fit the crime. That losing you was what I'd earned for being impulsive and selfish. But that belief didn't make me better. It just kept me stuck." Scott leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Jennifer, it did change everything." "I know," she said quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness. Or understanding. I just needed you to hear that I know I destroyed something good. And that I regret it every day." His jaw worked. He looked out the window for a long moment, watching pedestrians pass like they were part of another life. "When you kissed that guy," he said finally, "I didn't hear anything else. Not the explanation. Not the shouting afterward. All I could think was that I'd been wrong about you. About us." Her stomach twisted. "I wish you'd stayed. I wish I'd chased you harder. I wish I'd asked," he countered gently. "But after that, I felt small. Embarrassed. I didn't know how to stay without resenting you or myself." She nodded again, tears stinging now, unashamed. "So you left." "So I left," he agreed. They sat with that truth between them. Heavy. Necessary. "So," Scott said eventually, clearing his throat, "what have you been doing with yourself besides ambushing people at baggage claim?" She snorted reflexively. "Threat assessment. Fair. I work in operations now. Logistics. It's boring in a way I find comforting." "That tracks," he said. "You always liked systems. And Saturdays I volunteer at the library. Kids reading program." His eyebrows lifted. "You do." "I do. I love it. They're honest in a way adults forget how to be." He smiled at that, something warm softening his face. "You always were good with kids. Remember my cousin's twins?" She laughed. "They tried to eat the book. They tried to eat everything." A shared memory settled comfortably between them, less painful than the others. "What about you?" she asked. "Consulting. Small firm. I own it now. Travel more than I should." "No wife?" she asked before she could stop herself, then winced. "Sorry. That was invasive." He shook his head. "No. No wife. No kids." She tried to school her expression but failed to hide the flicker of something. Relief? Sadness? Hope? That crossed it. "And you?" he asked gently. "No husband," she said. "No kids." Another pause. This one hummed. "I didn't date much," she added, compelled to be honest. It felt unfair. To compare real people to a memory. His gaze sharpened. "You compared them to me? To who I should have let you become," she corrected. Scott looked down at his coffee, then back up. "I compared everyone to you, too. For a while." They both smiled then, small and rueful. "Jennifer," he said after a moment, voice steady. "I can't promise anything. I don't know what this," he gestured vaguely between them, "is yet. But I don't hate you. I never did." The words loosened something deep in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. They finished their coffee talking about neutral things. Bad movies, airline food, how neither of them understood people who woke up cheerful. When they stood to leave, there was still no hug, but there was warmth and something like trust beginning again. Outside, Sunlight hit her full in the face. Same time next week? Scott asked. Not a question exactly. An offering. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. I'd like that. As she walked away, Jennifer realized something that startled her nearly as much as seeing him again. Coffee wasn't closure. It was an opening. Chapter 3, Saturday Voices. Saturday mornings belonged to the children. Jennifer arrived at the library early, as she always did, slipping through the staff entrance with her tote bag bumping against her hip. The building was quieter at this hour, the calm before the storm of small voices, scraped chairs, and enthusiastic opinions about dinosaurs and princesses and trucks. She liked setting up before anyone else arrived. There was something grounding about arranging the low stools in a semicircle, laying out the books she'd chosen with care. Today's theme was curiosity. She'd picked stories with questions tucked inside them, pages that invited interruption. Kids didn't read passively. They interrogated. She checked the schedule taped to the side of the story podium. 9 children signed up today. A good number. Manageable chaos. As she worked, her mind drifted, against her will, back to yesterday's coffee. To Scott's voice saying her name without anger. To the way the past had loosened its grip just enough to let air in. She had caught herself smiling for no reason twice already that morning and told herself to stay present. The kids deserved all of her attention. They always did. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doors to the children's wing opened, and the calm shattered beautifully. Parents filed in with backpacks and jackets half-zipped. Children raced ahead, immediately dropping to the floor with the unself-conscious confidence Jennifer admired. She greeted each of them by name as they signed in. She knew their favorite colors, their reading levels, who hated sitting still and who pretended not to but absolutely did. Ms. Jen, Lily shouted, barreling into her legs with a hug that nearly knocked her off balance. Good morning, Lily, Jennifer laughed, steadying herself. You're early. I brought my own book, Lily announced proudly, holding up a tattered paperback missing its front cover. Perfect, Jennifer said. We can all learn something today. The program started as it always did, with wriggling and whispers and the slow miracle of attention settling into place. Jennifer read aloud, modulating her voice, asking questions, pausing for the children to shout answers that sometimes had nothing to do with the story at all and everything to do with what mattered to them. She didn't notice the newcomer at first. It was only when she glanced up mid-sentence, checking the room like she'd learned to do, that she saw him standing near the entryway. Scott. Her heart stuttered, but she didn't stop reading. She didn't have to. He stayed where he was, unobtrusive, leaning against the wall with a small girl at his side. The child, dark curls, wary eyes, clung to his hand while scanning the room like she wasn't sure she belonged. Scott didn't look at Jennifer. He was focused entirely on the girl, crouching slightly to whisper something in her ear. The girl nodded. Jennifer finished the page, closed the book, and smiled at her audience. Who wants to tell me what the caterpillar was curious about? Hands shot up, including the new girl's, tentative halfway. Jennifer caught it. Yes. The girl glanced back at Scott, who gave an encouraging nod. He wanted to know what came next, she said softly. That's right, Jennifer said warmly. That's a very important thing to be curious about. The girl smiled, a small, brave thing. The rest of the session unfolded with the usual energy. Interruptions, laughter, questions that spiraled delightfully out of control. Jennifer moved among the children, guiding, redirecting, letting them lead. Out of the corner of her eye, she occasionally caught Scott watching her. Not with nostalgia exactly, with recognition. When the program ended, parents began collecting coats and children, thanking Jennifer as they always did. She knelt to Lily's level to accept another hug, then straightened just as Scott approached. My niece, he said by way of introduction, gesturing to the girl now examining a stuffed bear on the shelf. Maya. It's nice to meet you, Maya, Jennifer said, crouching again. You had a great answer today. Maya beamed, then glanced at Scott. Can I look at more books? You can, Scott said. I'll be right here. Maya wandered off, emboldened. Jennifer rose, brushing off her knees. I didn't know you had a niece. She's 8, Scott said. My sister moved here a year ago. Maya's still adjusting. She did wonderfully, Jennifer said sincerely. First days can be hard. Scott nodded. That's why I thought this might help. He hesitated, then added, I didn't know you volunteered here. I just stumbled onto the right day, I guess. Jennifer smiled. I like to think kids find what they need. They stood there, comfortable in the shared quiet, watching Maya carefully line up books by size. You're good at this, Scott said. You always were. Her throat tightened, but she kept her tone light. I like watching them discover things. Their energy, their curiosity. It's like watching a flower bloom. Scott looked at her then, not the girl he'd known, but the woman she'd become. Something unspoken passed between them. I forgot how much you wanted this, he said carefully. I didn't, she replied. The weight of that truth settled gently, not painfully. Maya bounded back over. Uncle Scott, can I come back next week? Scott smiled down at her. If Ms. Jen says it's okay. Jennifer returned the smile, warm and certain. It's more than okay. As they left, Scott paused at the door. Coffee again? Jennifer nodded. Yes. After they were gone, Jennifer tidied the room, her movements unhurried. A child's question echoed in her mind. What comes next? For the first time in a long while, the answer didn't scare her. She locked the cabinet, turned off the lights, and let herself hope, just a little. Chapter 4. The lives we built without each other. Jennifer discovered that seeing Scott regularly did not make the past louder. That surprised her most of all. They met for coffee again the following week, then again after that. Sometimes it was coffee, sometimes it was lunch squeezed between meetings, sometimes it was walking without destination through parts of the city that had changed just enough to feel newly discovered. They did not label what they were doing. They did not need to yet. What they did do was talk. On a mild Wednesday evening, they walked along the waterfront, wind teasing loose strands of Jennifer's hair, while the sun took its time sinking into the river. Boats drifted lazily, their lights wobbling on the surface like ideas not yet fully formed. So, Scott said, hands in his pockets, when did you decide you were done dating? Jennifer considered the question carefully. It deserved that much. I don't think it was a decision I announced to myself. It was more like a habit I fell into. Saying no became easier than saying maybe. What about before that? He asked. Right after. Everything. She winced, not at him, but at the memory. I tried. A little. I was terrible at it. He smiled faintly. How so? I compared everyone to you, she said simply, and then felt guilty for doing it, and then felt worse for realizing I wasn't fully there. She shrugged. It didn't feel fair. To them. Scott nodded, eyes on the water. I dated too. Every relationship ended with me thinking, you don't know what you're competing with. Ghosts, Jennifer said. Exactly. He glanced at her. Hard opponents. No flaws. Perfect memory preservation. She huffed a quiet laugh. Selective editing is powerful. They walked a few steps in silence, shoes crunching against gravel. What about you? She asked. You ever come close? He hesitated. She appreciated that. Not the drama of it, but the care. Once, he said. Maybe twice. Good people. Wrong timing. Or maybe I was. You don't sound bitter about it. I'm not, he said. I like my life. I worked hard to build something steady. She nodded. Me too. That was the truth. It didn't diminish the ache, it contextualized it. A jogger passed them, earbuds in, oblivious to the quiet thread being held between two people increasingly aware of it. Do you ever wonder, Jennifer said slowly, who we'd be if none of that had happened? Scott thought about it. I used to. A lot. But the older I get, the more I realize we'd be strangers to who we are now. She smiled, relieved by the answer. I like who you are now. He returned the smile easily. I like who you are now too. That night, she went home smiling to herself and immediately scolded her reflection for it. Progress, she reminded herself, not momentum. The following Saturday, Scott came to the library again with Maya. This time he stayed after, not hovering, just present. Jennifer introduced them to the other volunteers, watched as Scott listened attentively, while Maya explained the rules of a game she had apparently invented on the spot. You have a good uncle, Jennifer told her later. Maya shrugged in a way that suggested this was obvious. He makes pancakes on Sundays. Jennifer glanced at Scott. That's serious commitment. Blueberry when I'm feeling ambitious, he said solemnly. Maya broke into giggles. Later, as they walked out together, Scott asked, dinner? Jennifer hesitated, not from disinterest but from awareness. Yes, she said, but no pancakes. Unfortunate, he replied, smiling. Dinner turned out to be a small Thai place tucked between a barber shop and a nail salon, the kind of place that remembered your order if you came twice. They talked about work first, safe territory. Jennifer described her office, the rhythms of her week, how much she liked improving processes most people never noticed. It's invisible competence, Scott said. Underrated skill. She warmed at that. Your firm sounds impressive. It's functional, he corrected, which is how I measure success. She smiled, still tracking. After a lull, Scott asked, do you want kids? The question was gentle, neutral, and yet it landed directly on something tender. Yes, she said without hesitation. Then, quieter, I always have. He nodded, absorbing that. I used to think I did because it was expected. Somewhere along the way, I realized I want them because I want to teach someone how to exist in the world without being afraid of it. Jennifer felt her throat close around the ache and the hope braided together. That sounds like you. They shared a look that lingered maybe a second longer than before. On the drive home, Jennifer replayed the evening. Not obsessively, but thoughtfully. Every step forward felt reasonable. Earned. Still, a whisper of fear crept in. This was where she always faltered. When things became possibility instead of memory. The next week tested her resolve. She caught herself pulling back, not outwardly but internally. She delayed responding to Scott's texts, offered shorter answers, Told herself she was busy, which wasn't untrue, but wasn't the whole truth either. She noticed it. She hated it. One evening, when Scott called instead of texting, she almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. "Hey," she said, forcing brightness. "Hey, I caught you at a bad time." "No," she lied, because she'd always done that before too. "Jennifer," he said gently. "You're quieter." Her chest tightened. She closed her eyes. The city hummed outside her apartment window. "I don't want to mess this up," she admitted finally. He exhaled. "Neither do I. And I'm afraid." She stopped, swallowed. "I'm afraid that wanting something again means I could ruin it again." Scott was quiet for a moment. Then, "You don't get redemption by opting out of risk." She leaned her forehead against the glass. He was right. That scared her most of all. "I'm not asking for a promise," he continued. "I'm not asking for certainty. I just want honesty. If you need space, tell me. If you're scared, tell me. Just don't disappear." Her eyes burned. "I won't." She meant it. When they hung up, Jennifer stood there a long time, letting the truth settle. She wasn't being punished anymore. She was being invited to choose. And for the first time in years, that felt like freedom. Chapter 5. The question she never asked. The question arrived on a Tuesday night, uninvited and impossible to ignore. Jennifer was at home, curled sideways on the couch with her laptop open and muted, a spreadsheet glowing uselessly on the screen. She'd been staring at it for 10 minutes without registering a single cell. Outside, rain traced uneven paths down the window, the city reduced to blur and reflection. Her phone lay face down on the coffee table. She hadn't turned it over in 15 minutes. Scott had texted earlier, nothing heavy. A comment about a client meeting gone sideways, followed by a picture of a cafe pastry that was aggressively overdecorated. Normally, she would have laughed and responded instantly. Tonight, she hadn't. There it was again. The tightening. The instinct to withdraw right at the edge of something good. Jennifer closed the laptop with more force than necessary and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You're doing it," she told herself quietly. "You're doing the thing. The thing where fear disguised itself as caution. Where self-awareness masqueraded as responsibility. Where withholding felt safer than choosing." Her phone buzzed. She didn't flip it over. She didn't need to. She knew. "Hey," Scott said when she finally answered. Not accusing, just attentive. "Am I interrupting?" "No," she said, because this time she refused to let that be a lie. "I've been avoiding you." Pause. Then, "Thank you for saying that." Her chest tightened. "I think I need to talk to you in person." "Okay," he said immediately. "I can come by." "No," she said, surprising herself with the firmness. "I should come to you. I don't want to hide in my space." Another pause, shorter this time. "I'll make tea." She changed into jeans and a sweater, movements deliberate, grounding herself in each step. By the time she reached her car, her pulse had steadied. Not calmed, exactly, but purposeful. Scott lived in a small townhouse not far from downtown. The place felt like him. Clean without being precious, shelves lined with books and framed photos that spoke of travel rather than people. Maya smiled out at her from one frame, missing a front tooth, triumphant. "Hi," Scott said as he opened the door. "Hi." They stood there a moment, neither moving closer, neither stepping back. "Tea?" he offered again, gentler. "Yes." They sat at opposite ends of the couch. Steam rose from their mugs, filling the space with the faint scent of chamomile. "I keep realizing," Jennifer began, fingers tight around the ceramic, "that there's something I never asked you." Scott didn't rush her. He watched, receptive but wary. "Okay. That night, after the party, after everything detonated." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Why didn't you try to explain?" The question hung between them, soft, sharp, overdue. Scott exhaled slowly, then leaned back, staring at the opposite wall as if memory lived there. "I thought about that conversation 1,000 times, he said. "Every version ends with me opening my mouth too late." He glanced at her again. "When you kissed him, something collapsed. Not just trust. The idea that I mattered enough for you to doubt yourself." Her throat closed painfully. "I know that sounds dramatic," he added. "But in that moment, I didn't think you'd misread something. I thought you'd decided I wasn't worth clarifying." Jennifer swallowed. "You didn't think I loved you. I thought you loved the version of me you believed in," he said quietly. "And the second that belief cracked, you were already gone." She shook her head, tears burning now. "I was furious because I loved you. I couldn't imagine you betraying me, so I leapt to punish you for it." "I know that now," he said. "But back then, I just felt small. Like I'd been replaced in front of a room full of people who would always remember that image." She closed her eyes. "God, I never meant—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "But intent doesn't undo impact." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I let you believe the worst of me," she said. "I acted like I was certain when really I was terrified. And then I let you walk away without a fight." Scott's voice was steady when he replied. I thought leaving was the only way to keep what was left of my pride intact. They sat in silence, the past laid bare between them at last. Jennifer inhaled shakily. I didn't ask you because I was afraid of what I might learn. That you actually had cheated. That I hadn't ruined everything. I just exposed it. And if that had been true, she met his gaze. Then I could have been angry without being ashamed. Scott nodded slowly. But shame stuck. Yes, she whispered. And it became a substitute for responsibility. He shifted, turning toward her fully now. Jennifer, you don't owe your life to that mistake. You owed it accountability. You've done that. She shook her head. I don't know how to stop equating punishment with growth. Then maybe, he said carefully, you let someone else stand in it with you until your instincts catch up. The words landed softly, firmly. She looked at him, a man who had every reason to protect himself from her and was instead offering presence without conditions. I'm scared, she admitted, because this feels like forgiveness. And I don't know what I am without my penance. He reached out, not touching her yet, just resting his hand open on the cushion between them. An invitation. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, he said. It just decides it won't dictate what happens next. Slowly, like someone learning balance again, Jennifer placed her hand in his. The contact was steady, grounding, real. I don't want to run, she said. Then don't, he replied simply. She let out a breath that felt like oxygen after years underwater. They didn't kiss, not yet. Instead, Scott gently pulled her into his shoulder, and she let herself stay, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, the ordinary miracle of it. Later, when she drove home, the road seemed clearer somehow. Not easier, not predictable, but navigable. For the first time, Jennifer understood something that had eluded her for years. Asking the right question doesn't change the past, but it changes what you're allowed to carry forward. Chapter 6. Fear has a long memory. Jennifer knew she was unraveling the moment she started justifying it to herself. It began small, respectable even. A rescheduled dinner because of a late work meeting that truly did run long. A Sunday she claimed for errands instead of accepting Scott's invitation to walk the farmer's market with him and Maya. Each decision had logic attached. Each one felt temporary. Taken together, they formed a retreat. She noticed it in the quiet ways first. How she read his messages more than once before responding. How she drafted replies in her head that sounded warmer than what she actually sent. How she caught herself preparing explanations instead of experiences. Fear, she realized, didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it came disguised as responsibility. On Wednesday, Scott stopped by her office building unannounced. Not in a dramatic way, just standing across the street after work hours with his hands in his jacket pockets. Waiting. She saw him through the lobby glass and felt both relief and dread collide. What are you doing here? She asked, stepping outside. He smiled. Asking you to dinner the old-fashioned way, in person, where you can't take 6 hours to answer. She winced. Is that how long it's been? 7, he said mildly. But who's counting? She folded her arms, a reflex she immediately recognized as defensive. I've just been busy. I know, he said. I've been busy too. That's not the part I'm worried about. She exhaled, watching a bus has passed. Then what are you worried about? That you're pulling away without telling me why. There it was, calmly observed, not accused. I don't want to ruin this, she said, hating how familiar the word sounded. Scott tilted his head. By avoiding it? She flinched. He softened immediately. I'm not trying to corner you, Jennifer. I just promised myself a long time ago I wouldn't guess my way through someone else's distance. She looked at him, really looked, at the man who had learned how to stay without clinging, who was giving her the dignity of directness. Come over, she said quietly. Please. I don't want to do this on the sidewalk. Inside her apartment, the air felt charged, like a storm had passed nearby without arriving. Jennifer paced near the window while Scott remained standing, jacket draped over the chair, deliberately not invading her space. I keep thinking, she began, stopping abruptly, that I should feel more certain by now. Scott's brow furrowed. More certain of what? Of us, she admitted. Of where this is going. Of whether I deserve to be here at all. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but concern. What does deserving have to do with it? Everything, she almost said. Instead, she pressed on. When things start to feel good, I panic, she continued. I assume it's temporary, or conditional, or that I'll somehow prove myself unworthy of it. And your solution is to get ahead of that? He asked gently. Leave first. She swallowed. Not leave. Just fade. Scott nodded once, slow. I did that once too. It didn't protect either of us. She looked down at her hands. Fear has a long memory. Yes, he agreed. But it doesn't have to make all the decisions. I don't know how to turn it off. He stepped closer, not touching yet, careful. You don't turn it off. You acknowledge it and choose anyway. She shook her head. That's how people get hurt. That's how people get anything that matters, he replied. They stood there, the unspoken pressing in. Jennifer, Scott said after a moment, voice steady but firm. I meant what I said before. I'm not going anywhere without a conversation. I won't disappear. And I can't be with someone who believes love is a test they're destined to fail. Her throat closed painfully. I don't want to fail you. You won't, he said. Unless you decide ahead of time that you will. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I'm terrified that if I let myself want this, and it doesn't work, it will confirm everything I believed about myself for years. Scott considered her carefully. And if it does work? The question hung deceptively simple. I don't know who I am without the mistake, she whispered. He finally reached for her then. Just her hands warm and grounding. You're still the woman who made it. That doesn't vanish. But it doesn't have to lead every chapter. Her eyes burned. What if I hurt you again? Then we deal with it, he said plainly. Together. That's what I'm asking for. Not perfection. Participation. The word landed like a challenge and an invitation all at once. She squeezed his hands, anchoring herself. I don't want to be the person who hides from happiness. Then don't be, he said softly. Be the person who stays even when it's scary. Jennifer nodded, not with certainty, but with decision. Okay. He searched her face, making sure. Then he smiled. The small, relieved smile of someone who had been braced for loss and found footing instead. Okay, he echoed. They didn't rush anything after that. They sat on the couch, shoulders touching, talking about unimportant things until the tension eased and the air felt breathable again. When Scott eventually stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. I'm proud of you, he said, for naming it. She smiled, tired but lighter. I'm proud of you for not letting me disappear. He leaned in then, not hurried, not claiming, just a kiss that felt like punctuation instead of declaration. When the door closed behind him, Jennifer stood in the quiet and let the truth settle. Fear would resurface. She knew that. But for the first time, it wasn't steering. She had chosen to stay. Chapter 7, The Children Tell the Truth. The question came from the smallest voice in the room. Jennifer had just finished reading the last page of When Stars Ask Why. Her voice deliberately hushed as if the story's final curiosity might break if spoken too loudly. The children sat in their familiar semicircle, legs tucked, bodies swaying with the leftover energy of attention mostly spent. She closed the book and smiled. So, she said gently, what do you think the stars were really asking? Hands went up, some confident, some unsure. Jennifer pointed to a boy who always answered as if he were certain no one else could possibly be right. They wanted to know if anyone was listening, he said. She nodded. That's a beautiful thought. Another child said something about nightlights. Someone else mentioned astronauts. The discussion bubbled happily, veering and circling back, exactly the way she liked it. Then a small hand went up near the back. Jennifer smiled automatically. Yes, Mia? Mia was 5, missing 2 front teeth and perpetually squinting, like the world might sharpen if she did. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted her head, studying Jennifer with unfiltered seriousness. Ms. Jen, she said, why don't you have kids if you like us so much? The room went quiet in a way children rarely managed on purpose. Heat rushed to Jennifer's face. Not embarrassment, exactly, but surprise. Children's questions were honest by nature, but this one landed with surgical precision. Several parents froze mid-motion. One of the other volunteers inhaled sharply. Jennifer crouched down to Mia's level, keeping her voice calm. That's a very thoughtful question. Mia nodded solemnly, satisfied that this was correct. Well, Jennifer continued carefully, sometimes people want things very much, and it still takes a while for life to line up the right way. Mia frowned. Did you wait too long? The question pierced, clean and unintentional. Jennifer opened her mouth and closed it again. She could have deflected. She could have softened it with vagueness, wrapped it in something comforting and untrue. She'd had years of practice doing exactly that. Instead, she chose honesty, not with all its detail but with its spirit. I was scared once, she said gently. And when you're scared, you sometimes stop yourself from getting what you want. Mia considered this, then nodded decisively. My dad says that too. Jennifer smiled, warmth spreading through her chest, chasing some long-held tightness away. Your dad sounds like a smart man. Scott stood near the doorway, unnoticed by most of the children. He had arrived quietly with Maya, planning to slip in late. He now watched from a distance, completely still. The program ended soon after. Coats were wrangled, parents exchanged apologies and gratitude. Children waved goodbye with the exaggerated enthusiasm of people who lived fully in the moment. When the room cleared, Jennifer leaned against the low bookshelf, pressing her palms flat against the wood. Her heart was beating quickly, not from nerves, but recognition. Fear, she realized, had been running the show far longer than she'd admitted. Scott approached slowly, mindful of the moment. Kids, he said softly, have an impressive talent for identifying emotional weak spots. Jennifer laughed weakly. She didn't even hesitate. She never does, he replied. It's terrifying. Jennifer's gaze drifted to Maya, now deeply engaged in explaining something to another child using animated hand gestures. I think, Jennifer said quietly, I've been confusing punishment with responsibility. Scott tilted his head. Tell me. For a long time, she continued, I thought living carefully was the same thing as making amends, that denying myself joy was proof I'd learned something. She exhaled shakily. But all it really did was keep me stuck. Scott said nothing, letting her finish. I stopped dating because I thought wanting things made me reckless, she said. But I wasn't reckless. I was scared, and I've been calling that maturity ever since. He stepped closer, careful but present. That's a heavy thing to carry alone. I know, she said. I don't want to anymore. Maya ran back toward them. Uncle Scott, you promised smoothies. Scott smiled down at her. I did. Maya grinned at Jennifer. You should come too. They put sprinkles on the straws. Jennifer laughed, an easy, unguarded sound. Well, I can't argue with that. As they walked out together, Jennifer felt lighter. Not because something had resolved, but because she'd stopped fighting the truth. Children didn't lie to protect their narratives. They asked because they wanted understanding. Mia's question echoed softly in her mind, not with accusation, but invitation. Why don't you have kids if you like us so much? Jennifer finally had an answer worthy of the asking. Because I'm still learning how to let myself want what I want. And she was closer now than she'd ever been. Chapter 8. Not the same people. Jennifer realized she believed him the morning she woke up without bracing herself. The thought arrived quietly, without ceremony, while she stood in her kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil. No internal inventory of risks. No mental rehearsal of exits. Just a calm awareness of having chosen something, and still being here. That was new. She texted Scott before she could overthink it. Breakfast? My place. I'm making more food than one person should. His reply came almost immediately. On my way. I'll bring actual fruit so we can pretend this is balanced. She smiled at her phone, then set it face down and focused on cracking eggs without catastrophe. When Scott arrived, he didn't knock. He rang the bell, a small courtesy she'd come to notice. He greeted her with an easy kiss on the cheek and immediately took over coffee duty without asking, as if it were understood that competence could be shared. They moved around the kitchen without colliding, trading updates about unimportant things. A work email, Maya's latest obsession. A podcast neither of them actually liked, but both continued listening to out of stubbornness. Felt ordinary. Jennifer watched him from across the counter. The way he'd rolled up his sleeves like it wasn't a conscious choice. The way he listened even when there was nothing particularly important being said. I've been thinking, she said suddenly. Scott glanced up. Good or dangerous? Potentially both. She set the spatula down. About us. He gave her his full attention without tension. Okay. She took a breath. I don't need anything from you right now. Not labels. Not promises. Not a grand gesture designed to erase what came before. She hesitated, then added, but I want to be clear about something. He waited. I'm not interested in recreating the past, she said. I don't want to fix it or prove it could have worked. I want whatever comes next to exist on its own terms, even if it ends up looking nothing like what I once imagined. Scott studied her, something like relief softening his features. I was hoping you'd say that. Really? Yes, he said, because I don't want to be the guy who gets redeemed by nostalgia. I want to be chosen by the person you are now. Her eyes burned unexpectedly. I'm choosing you, she said, voice firm. Not the memory. Not the apology. You. He crossed the space between them slowly, deliberately, and rested his hands on the counter on either side of her. I'm not going anywhere, he said. But I won't promise you perfection. I will promise effort. Transparency. Staying in the room when things get uncomfortable. She nodded. That's what I want. They leaned in, not rushed, not careful in the fragile way, just present. When they kissed, it felt earned. Not a spark reignited, but a warmth built intentionally. Later that afternoon, they walked through the park near her apartment, pacing themselves to the rhythm of conversation rather than destination. Families picnicked on blankets. A child toddled past chasing a bubble with heroic determination. Jennifer slowed, watching. Do you ever think, she said quietly, about how different this feels? Scott followed her gaze. All the time. It doesn't feel like a second chance, she continued. It feels like a first, because we're not the same people. He nodded. We have context now, and scars, and better communication skills. She smiled. Marginally better. He laughed. Noticeably better. They stopped near the playground fence. Jennifer rested her arms along the top rail, breathing in the warm air, the sound of laughter and scraped knees and unfiltered joy. I don't know what the future looks like, she said. And for once, that doesn't terrify me. Scott stepped beside her. That's healthy progress. She glanced at him. I don't want you to feel like you're waiting for me to become someone else, or to get over something completely. That may never happen. I'm not waiting, he said simply. I'm here. The simplicity of it landed deeper than anything dramatic ever could have. As they walked home, Jennifer felt the old questions quiet, not silenced, but softened. The what-ifs no longer clawed at her attention. They had become part of the landscape, not the horizon. That night, as Scott left and Jennifer locked the door behind him, she leaned her forehead against the wood and closed her eyes. This wasn't the life she'd imagined at 22. It was better. Not because it erased the past, but because it refused to be ruled by it. She turned off the lights, carrying forward not certainty, but choice. And that, she knew now, was enough. Chapter 9. The future. Revised. Jennifer learned the sound of a life settling into place wasn't loud. It was subtle. It happened in the spaces between things, in the way mornings stopped feeling like hurdles, in the way her shoulders no longer rose automatically when her phone buzzed. It happened in the soft confidence of routines she chose, not ones she hid behind. Spring edged into summer without ceremony. At work, Jennifer received a promotion she accepted, without downplaying her competence or apologizing for ambition. Her new role came with longer meetings and bigger decisions, but also something she hadn't expected: visibility. People listened when she spoke. Systems changed because she noticed their inefficiencies. She found she liked responsibility when it wasn't weighed down by self-doubt. She told Scott about it over dinner one night, halfway through a plate of pasta she'd made from scratch. "They should have done that years ago," he said without hesitation. She smiled. "I know. It took me a while to stop assuming recognition was temporary." He lifted his glass to her. "Here's to permanence where it's earned." Saturday mornings remained sacred. The children's reading program grew, more names on the sign-in sheet, more volunteer help needed. Jennifer trained 2 new volunteers, catching herself giving guidance with the same calm confidence she used at work. She no longer explained herself to the parents with apologies. She simply showed up, steady and joyful. Scott came often now, sometimes with Maya, sometimes alone. Maya had decided Jennifer's apartment was officially the quiet place, which she declared with the authority of someone who'd tested the acoustics. She spread her books across the living room rug and asked questions using the same unsparing honesty that had undone Jennifer weeks earlier. One afternoon, as Jennifer helped her sound out a tricky word, Maya squinted up at her. "You're happier," she observed. Jennifer paused. "What makes you say that? You don't get that face anymore?" Maya said, scrunching her eyebrows dramatically. "The thinking too hard one." Jennifer laughed, startled by the accuracy. "I guess I finally learned how to stop arguing with myself." Maya nodded solemnly, as if this confirmed an important suspicion. Later, as Scott drove Maya home, Jennifer stood in the doorway watching them go, Scott leaning down to listen as Maya whispered something urgent, his hand automatically shielding her from the car door. It didn't ache the way it used to. It warmed. They didn't rush anything. No dramatic declarations. No grand gestures laced with expectation. When they did talk about the future, it came in pieces. Conversations woven into grocery shopping and late-night drives, into laughter and occasional disagreement. They talked about kids carefully. "Honestly, I don't want you to feel like you have to fast forward," Scott told her one evening as they sat on her couch, legs tangled, city lights blinking softly outside, "or that the clock is a threat." Jennifer considered that. "I don't feel rushed," she said, then added, surprised by the certainty, "I feel open." They talked about living arrangements someday, not as plans but as possibilities. They talked about how to fight, how neither of them disappeared anymore, how silence wasn't a weapon, how apologies were owned fully when they were owed. They talked about the past carefully, respectfully, without letting it dominate the room. It existed now as context, not conclusion. One Friday evening, months after the airport, Jennifer and Scott attended a small engagement party for friends of his. The couple glowed with fresh certainty. Sparkling wine flowed. Toasts curved toward the dramatic. Jennifer listened, smiling, feeling something unexpected. "Peace. You okay?" Scott murmured, leaning closer. "More than okay," she said, surprised by how true it felt. "It doesn't feel like I missed anything." Later that night, when they walked home beneath strings of patio lights still humming with laughter, Scott slowed. "Jennifer," he said suddenly, stopping. "Before this goes any further, before we let other people's expectations drift in, I want you to know something." She turned to face him, heart steady. "I love the life we're building," he continued. "Not the version that fixes the past. The one that exists because we chose it carefully." She reached for his hand. "Me too." He smiled, relieved and certain in a quiet way that matched her own. They stood there a moment longer, the future stretching out unannounced and unassuming. Jennifer thought of the woman she'd been, 22 and furious, convinced certainty lived in action instead of understanding. She thought of the years she'd carried guilt like proof of growth. She felt no anger toward that version of herself anymore. Only compassion. Life hadn't turned out the way she'd once imagined. It had turned out better, not because it avoided pain but because it taught her how to stay. Weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon thick with summer heat, Jennifer sat on the library floor, surrounded by children, their voices overlapping with excitement as they debated the moral complexity of a storybook fox. She laughed, listened, guided. Scott leaned against the back wall, watching. Their eyes met briefly across the room, No history leaping between them, no grand meaning attached, just recognition. This, Jennifer realized, was the future she would have missed if she'd remained devoted to punishment. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but chosen. And when the children finally scattered and the room quieted, Jennifer turned out the lights, heart full and unafraid, carrying forward a life she had finally allowed herself to want.